Now that you've had a few learning experiences, you're ready to consider 10 important learning principles. These principles were developed by the Alternative University of Bucharest, which is dedicated to self-directed learning. I'm going to present them briefly and will then invite you to reflect on them. Make sure you write down your reflections so that you can use them later. The first learning principle is I craft myself consciously. This refers to designing yourself by choosing what you want to learn. What you know and what you're capable of is an essential part of your identity. If you know who you want to be in the future, you can then learn yourself into that new you. Pause the video, reflect and write down your responses to this question. In what ways do I see learning as a means for self-design and conscious evolution? The second principle is I can learn anything, anytime. This refers to learning anything you're willing to put enough effort into, and any time is a good time for learning. Pause the video, reflect, and write down your responses to these questions. Do I believe I can learn anything? If not, what do I think I can't learn and why? The third learning principle is learning happens outside the classroom. This points at the fact that you don't need a classroom or a formal process to learn. We actually learn all the time, and our most profound learnings often come from normal life. So why do we tend to associate learning with school? Pause the video again and reflect on the question, what's the difference between learning in school and learning outside of school? The fourth principle is learning is connected to the environment. This refers to the fact that where, when, and with whom we learn affects our learning. Different physical, virtual, and social environments influence your learning abilities and motivations. Pause the video and reflect again. What environments provide you with the best learning conditions? What environments are difficult for you to learn in? The fifth principle is learning is meaningful. This refers to the idea that what we most easily learn is meaningful for us. Things which seem meaningless are quickly forgotten. You're the only one who can give meaning to your learning. Pause the video again and reflect. When have you found learning to be most meaningful for you? And how did that feel? The sixth learning principle is learning is fun. This refers to finding the joy in learning. Many school experiences leave us with very negative feelings about learning. Learning can certainly be very difficult, but it doesn't have to be boring and can be a very happy experience. Finding a love for learning, like most children have, is one of the greatest rewards that come from becoming a self-directed learner. Pause again, reflect, and write down your response to this question. What's been the most fun learning experience I've ever had? The seventh principle is learning changes my brain. This refers to the neuroscientific fact that your brain is plastic. Learning is about changing your brain and yourself. Pause the video and reflect again. Does the idea of learning feel different when I consider its impact on my brain? What do I feel when I consider that my intelligences are not fixed? The eighth principle is I integrate failure. This principle relates to the power of turning failure into rich learnings. Many school processes make us believe that the point of learning is to avoid making mistakes. But a self-directed learner integrates failure into their learning processes without feeling bad about themselves. Pause the video again and reflect. How comfortable am I with learning from my failures? The ninth principle is I take responsibility for my own learning. This means that you're in charge of your own learning. Other people can help you learn, but no one else can learn for you. Pause the video and reflect. When do I blame others for my poor learning experiences? The 10th and final learning principle is we're all learners. This refers to the idea that we're all born to learn. Learning is a fundamental characteristic of being human. Teachers and students are learners. Everyone has something to teach and something to learn. Pause the video again and reflect on this question. How do I think learning changes when teachers see themselves as learners? I'd encourage you to turn back to the notes you've made in this part of the course. Adopt these learning principles to start with and eventually start to design your own. You should now be ready to move on to design your own learning strategy in part 2 of the course. But before moving on, I'd encourage you to take the quiz to see if you've fully understood all the concepts related to preparing yourself to learn and to adopting the stance of a self-directed learner.